Greetings, friends. I'm going to respond in a loose fashion, no notes, to the comments on my video from August 4th, 2019, titled Subversive and Degenerate Music, 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, Rammstein, etc. And I was commenting on, or inspired by, Devin Stack of Blackpilled, who did the same thing about 9 Inch Nails specifically, and he was talking about the lyrics of 9 Inch Nails, and so I was partly interested in following that topic because I agreed with what he said, even though I liked 9 Inch Nails when I was younger. And actually I pointed out that these artists have all produced pretty good music. Good in terms of composition of the music, and catchy and hypnotic, certainly, in the case of 9 Inch Nails. Powerful lyrics, shocking some often, and just, there's a lot of artistry and talent to what these guys do. And I thought I made that very clear, but I think a lot of people didn't even really listen to the video. And so there's all sorts of characterizations of me in criticizing and simply pointing out that these things are degenerate and subversive, at least in terms of the lyrics. When you get into sound itself, okay, that's more speculative. But certainly we can agree lyrics and sometimes imagery in music videos. I mean, that stuff isn't like so hard to interpret. So what are you going to be at the end of the day? Are you going to be a relativist? Is there such thing as a cultural model that you want to maintain, or are we all just open, anything goes? We can try that. It's happened in history, so do you want to try that? You want to see where society goes? Do you think society is going anywhere right now? You don't think there's any degeneration in our society? Do you agree or no? Or can we talk about degenerate music? So just let's keep that in mind in the beginning. But anyway, so let me get into some of these comments. I mean, again, YouTube is really funny. They often delete comments. Very often comments show in my notifications tab, but then they never appear on the video. I know sometimes people can delete their own comments. I don't think that's happening. I think it's YouTube. I've almost never deleted comments unless it's spam, because, if someone disagrees with you, let them say what they want to say. That's fine. Jimmy Junker says, recently went through a major depression. 9 Inch Nails saved my life. The only music I felt I completely understood what I was going through. You have every right to your opinion, but please do not call yourself a free thinker. You're nothing of the sort. Calling yourself such makes you a liar. Stop lying. Well, okay, I don't need to address the second part of what he's saying, because that's just ad hominem. He didn't give any reason for it. And what do you think? A free thinker has to agree with what you think all the time? That's what makes a free thinker, if they agree with you? But anyways, in terms of the first thing he was saying, I mean, yeah, people who are dealing with demons, they're gonna, get out of it's weird. They're gonna get out of their demonic possessions sometimes through very dark means, because that's where they are in life. So I guess it kind of makes sense. But I mean, even if it did help you get through depression, even those people can still realize, oh yeah, well, for most people, for general people, probably this isn't the most healthy imagery to get out there. If you're sick, then maybe it's like Carl Jung said, the psychiatrist gets a little ill with his patient. But that doesn't mean you want the general population in there in the private living room where the patient is pouring out his soul. That doesn't mean it's healthy for the whole general population to be there. So like Carl Jung said about being a little ill to help your patient work out some issues, I can see what you mean. Sure, dark stuff can help people through depression. That's not the point of what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's subversive and degenerate to some degree. Oh my God, so am I saying like shut it down? Am I saying destroy all 9 Inch Nails albums? I never said anything like that. A lot of these people are thinking that I'm like some sort of like want to institute this religious authoritarianism. That's crazy. This has to be voluntary. We have to buy into it. We all have to agree to this. But yes, there have to be some things. In any society, some things have to be allowed and others not allowed. We can agree on that. So by living in a society, it's like, are you going to have one culture or not? Because otherwise it falls apart. But maybe that's the major issue. Maybe they think we can keep having society without any fundamental culture. So that's about all I have to say to Jimmy Junka. And then another person just attacks me for being not a free thinker, which there's no point in responding to that. But another guy called Philip Jeffries commented on this thread. He says, people who say Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson are quote-unquote degenerate are those who are mentally stuck in the late 90s and are unaware of the horrors of Nicki Minaj or Miley Cyrus. And I responded to Mr. Jeffries. I say, Nicki Minaj and Miley Cyrus and their artists, like they're similar, industry of artists, who built on the degeneracy which came before it. I mean, you don't think I'm aware of how crap music is these days? What's the point of even listening to any of it? Yes, you can listen to 90s music, even degenerate music like Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails, and say, wow, music was much better back then. Generation X produced some kick-ass music, as I've discussed, and they would be examples of this. Just being kick-ass, making you feel good. Things that you think help you, that doesn't mean it's good for society as a whole. And what you're just gonna focus on how crazy things are today. Like, how do you think things got to that point? Do you think things just suddenly went wrong in the early 2000s and then suddenly that's where it all started? No, these things go way, way, way back. And let's see here. Right, another person 8 months ago, Gaz, says that The Downward Spiral is an album about a character drifting into insanity. It's not really telling people to reenact it. So by Downward Spiral, the album, he's referring to a Nine Inch Nails album from the early, around 94, I believe, around that time. And we had a bit of a discussion with other people getting into it. And he says, and in the song with the same title, it is the character's counterpart mindset talking to himself. Well, that's irrelevant. But my point is that people will still be affected by this negatively. Maybe not everyone, but some people. And not everyone's just gonna, I should read up on this I should read up on this history. Do you think the general public is gonna do that? Well, who do you think the general public are? Who do you think children are, or the average person? Do you think the average person is intelligent and rational and thinks for themselves and is going to, not going to absorb information from popular culture? They're not going to absorb anything on a conscious or subconscious level. You don't think that? You don't think that's going to happen to some significant degree? Again, I didn't say, wipe out the albums. I'm just pointing out why you can call it degenerate or subversive. Subversive in the sense that it's not a Christian culture. And this doesn't really matter what denomination of Christian you are. I mean, at least unless you're really far out, I don't think that should really matter. But as we'll see, I don't think it hasn't. Protestants, I mean, despite a lot of them, the evangelicals being like, anti-abortion and anti-this, and even in the 90s, some of you are characterizing me as an evangelical, as this other guy does. Here, I'll return to the thought of why it's actually silly to bring up the evangelicals. You should be bringing up Catholics or Orthodox, not Protestants. Anyways, another guy called Anarchy1408 says, with the logic I was using in that response, The guy was saying, well, then with that logic, literally anyone can be influenced by literally anything, even things you say. You are picking and choosing things. If it affected everyone, then everyone would be a satanic degenerate, and a lot more people would kill themselves because of the music, or they would start satanic worship. Even I, he's referring to me, like, even I am actually going to end up becoming what quasi-illuminos, I don't know who that is, quasi-illuminos, and the people who follow him eventually became. And please don't try to sing the lyrics of any Sansu. And I guess you don't believe in mental illness or depression either, or it seems like you don't, because that's literally the point of that Nine Inch Nails CD. Picking and choosing bands is so dumb. Marilyn Manson did those things because it got attention. By the way, he's swearing a lot here, but I'm censoring the swearing, because I'm not that kind of guy. You don't need to swear all the time. It degrades the quality of your speech. Anyways, he says it got people attention when Marilyn Manson did that, to make him controversial. He got people like you to make him money out of controversy. It's literally just a effing shtick. The point of controversy is to make more money, law. So those silly evangelicals, why are you, they tried to pillory Marilyn Manson. And of course everyone is going to be influenced by things they hear in their social circle and popular culture. It's called living in a society. So that's why we try not to swear around children, for example. And most adults aren't too different from children. They're a bit more advanced, but they're not all that different from children. So yeah, Marilyn Manson whoring himself for attention, that doesn't somehow make it a good message. Again, we're just like, none of these, they're not actually addressing the point, which is that this is subversive. It is degenerate. We've grown up in an absolutely immoral culture. People like this guy don't see this because they've been sitting in it their whole lives. And when someone tells you it stinks, then you make excuses. Someone was saying that I don't seem to believe in mental illness, or I don't take mental illness seriously, because either some of these albums are about depression or they help people work through depression. And of course I was talking about demons earlier and how you do work out your demons. And I say demons because my belief in the validity of mental illness is questionable. It's like I partly see the truth of it, and I see the other side of the coin, which is just the psychiatry industry. Not like Carl Jung, like how the psychiatry industry, developed today, creating all these categories and all this stuff which they prescribe drugs for, and they constantly talk about chemical imbalance. I don't know. Who knows how real the chemical imbalance thing is? Maybe it's real. Maybe there's some sort of chemical imbalance going on. But yeah, I don't know. Why do we need this whole idea of mental illness? You've got a demon. You've got to work out your demon. Maybe you need to. I don't know. Maybe you need to go take ayahuasca or pray or something. Because we didn't have this whole mental illness stuff for centuries, and we're not better now because we do. People now are less capable than they were in the past. They're dumber. They're less emotionally intelligent than they were in the past. They have far poorer social skills. And demons are real, by the way. If you like science, they actually are real. There are invisible spirits, and they may link up with physical or mental problems. It may not be one or the other, but they're there together. Okay, the whole bipolar thing, obsessive compulsive disorder. At the end of the day, these are behaviors. You can call it depression, you can call it whatever. It's a problem of the soul. It's a problem of your spirit. You don't need to get all clinical about it. So again, just having an album about depression doesn't mean that it has to be degenerate. An example would be Matthew Good released the album Hospital Music, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago. And he's supposedly bipolar. I know, okay, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I know I was just talking about mental illness, but fine, he had a real problem. He had a spiritual problem. Can we agree on that? Maybe he had more problems than that, but let's just say, okay, he had a serious mental problem, spiritual problem. And he spent time in the hospital, and he produced a good album, which is kind of in the like folk music. I mean, he kind of did the rock and roll thing in the 90s, but what happened? We got older, you went more into the folk kind of music. And again, I don't necessarily like it as much as his early 90s music. And still, maybe he'll swear sometimes. Okay, fine, swearing here and there, whatever. In music, it has a certain place. But if you're swearing like all the time, then maybe we can say that's unnecessary. But my point in bringing up Matthew Good and his album Hospital Music is that, well, there's a guy that's dealt with constant depression in his life, and he didn't do something like those other guys. Okay, now I'm not saying those other guys shouldn't have done that, or we need to destroy their albums. I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that one is degenerate and the other is not, by any reasonable definition. It is not degenerate what Matthew Good did. He took a lot of darkness and produced real beauty with it. You can produce ugly things out of your darkness too. He says if it affected everyone, then everyone would be a satanic degenerate. No, why would that mean that everyone becomes a satanic degenerate? But it just means that there is a noticeable effect on society. Yes, I understand it's like, oh, go to the source, like fix things at your home, or like these are just the products of a bad childhood or a bad life. I mean, yes, fine, but that's irrelevant. That's beside the point. Mr. Krills says, this makes Christian values almost sound like a cult. Right, I think I've already addressed that sort of idea, just pointing out that something is subversive or degenerate, like saying that God is dead and no one cares. If there is a hell, I'll see you there. Saying like that's something like that, especially in your chorus, and singing that in front of like tens of thousands of people at Woodstock 94, I believe, while you're covered in mud, like some sort of beast from the swamp. What world are we living in when you can't say that this is messed up? This is the product of a culture which is falling in on itself, which is corrupted, rotten. In your heart, you know it's messed up too. That's why you're getting so angry with me. Because you can know that something's messed up and still do it. And then I think the last thing I'll respond to here is recently Pegleg Kickboxer. He says, good grief, this is why the Europeans kicked out you Puritans. Now this is an exceptionally silly thing to say, because the Catholics kicked out the Puritans, in the early, in the 17th century, roughly. So some of the Puritans, they come to the New World in America, and first of all, do you think in the 17th century either the Catholics or the Puritans what do you think their opinion would be if they saw any of the culture today? If they could see some of the 90s, like these bands I'm talking about, then and by the way, these bands weren't always so degenerate. Rammstein is still degenerate today, but Nine Inch Nails is not as degenerate as it was in the 90s. He got better. That's what I was trying to say in the video, but I don't think anyone paid attention to that. And what was Marilyn Manson, he's always going to be degenerate. But Trent Reznor improved somewhat. His more recent stuff is actually better music than the really degenerate stuff he made in the 90s. But that's beside the point. That's beside the point. So anyways, he's characterizing me as a Puritan. That's kind of similar to what other people are suggesting, that I'm just like evangelical. I mean, I should point out that several videos on my channel, I've pointed out some of the problems with Protestant theology, so I don't, would, for that reason, certainly don't characterize myself as a Puritan or evangelical. But I can appreciate any fellow Christian in many ways, and it's true they did try to crack down on this stuff in the 90s, and they eventually failed. Maybe they went about it in the wrong way, in a goofy way. Maybe they're the wrong people to do it because there's plenty of corruption on their side too. That always happens. No one's saying that like the church is somehow perfect. We're just saying that there should be standards that we should all recognize, whether you're in the church or not. And so the Europeans kicked out the Puritans like me. Well, the Puritans, they might have had their strict moral code, but look how it ended up. Because the Puritans were just one sect, and there were all these other Protestant sects, evangelicals, later Presbyterians, all these Methodists, and then there were, not to mention the Mormon Church, but it was actually the Catholics, who I'm assuming you're referring to when you say the Europeans kicked out you. You seem to be praising the Catholics for kicking out the Puritans, but don't you know that it was the Catholics who, up until fairly recently, I know it's changed now. I know now it's they've fallen into whatever, but up until fairly recently in the 20th century, it was Catholic culture that stood to guard culture against this kind of thing. Because they had, for one example, would be the Hays Code, which was in the United States like a law prohibiting certain portrayals or any portrayal of, the sexual act or graphic violence or many other things too, like any sort of thing of glorifying a murder, for example, or portraying a murder in a way that you think people might think it's cool, or hey, I should do that myself, or that person did a good thing. That was prohibited up until sometime, I think, around the late 60s, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a real rule, like you couldn't portray these things in films. And now you may say, well, that made the films worse because you couldn't have that expression. We just got to have all expression. We have to express everything that is in our capacity in order to make good art. I suppose that's the argument, or to have beauty. But I don't think that's right at all, because art is not subjective. Art is objective. Some things are objectively true and not. And in terms of a film, it doesn't matter. Not all films were originally supposed to be just for entertainment. Sometimes there's stories that need to be told. As lame as that sounds, not that I'm very, I take a skeptical view towards film culture over most of its history. But so this idea about Europeans kicking out Puritans, this Puritan mindset, no, they would not have liked any of this stuff. And if they just ran, if you sent Rammstein and Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson, all of them circa 1995, if you somehow teleported them back in a time machine to, well, maybe not the 17th century, but let's say the 1500s, or any time, well, maybe the 1600s, around the time when they were having their religious wars. It's quite, if they saw them and they were dressed as they were, and they had their music, and they were playing their music, thinking that the people would like it. Obviously, that would be a dumb idea, but let's say they did. It's like, oh, that's who they are. This is what they do. Here's their music. Here they are. And village people, what do you think of this? And priest and lord, what do you guys think of it? They would burn these guys at the stake. They'd be burned at the stake. Am I calling for that? No. I'm just pointing out that it's stupid to think that Europeans would kick out Puritans, it was great, and then because the Puritans would want to. It's just a stupid thing to say. So basically, the main point is you're not calling for an authoritarian society. You're just calling for cultural norms. You gotta have cultural norms. It's no different from, you got a fat shaming. Like now we can't shame anyone for being grossly obese. It's the same thing. You can't point out that these bands contributed to a lot of the degeneracy that we see today. It's as simple as that. Hasta luego, amigos.